Seeing as it's May 4th, may the 4th be with you, we were feeling in the holiday spirit and decided to try our hand at a force lightning effect. Because we can, and we did, so it's done. For this, we decided to shoot in a dark room with some fog and flashing lights because of this scene. And because we wanted to, so we did.
Work it, watch me work it. I'ma do it how I wanna when I twerk it.
Now, given that there would ultimately be lightning flying out of Josh's hand palms, and we aren't stupid idiots, we added some reflective lighting in the scene that will act as light coming from the electricity. So we threw some Aperture MC lights on a stand, set them to a nice blue, then just aimed one light at each of his hand palms when he made his movement. And we have two little pieces of gaff tape on his hands to use for tracking later. So now with our shot, we shoot our shot into After Effects, where we will drop our shot into the new comp and create two null layers, one for the left track and one for the right. To track them, we'll move to a frame where we can clearly see these markers, right-click the footage, track and stabilize, track motion. Place the track over the marker and play through to the end. Then go back and track any earlier frames needed. At the start, when the reactive lights are off, we'll have to manually adjust the track on certain frames, but once that's done, choose the corresponding null as the target and apply X and Y. Then we'll do the same for the other hand, again manually altering some frames at the start and applying to the other null. We can then switch the visibility for these two off. Now it's time to get rid of the tracking marker since the hands will be covered by the electricity. For most of the shot, we can just do a quick job with the removal. A decent way to do this is to create a new solid layer, draw an ellipse mask, feather it, and move the layer over one of the tracking markers. Link this layer to the corresponding null and scale down to just cover the marker. We'll keyframe the scale to change throughout the scene as our camera moves forward in the shot. Now duplicate the footage layer to be our skin clean plate and set the track matte to use the alpha of our solid. Using a vector blur, we can decrease the amount it will shrink the marker. Then we'll use a fast box blur just to soften it slightly. And now this won't always work as it works on luminance, but it was a great solution for this specific shot. We duplicated the skin and matte solid layers, renaming and moving this solid over the other marker. Make sure to link it to the other track and change the track matte for the skin layer to duplicate solid. While we're at it, duplicate both track nulls and move to the top to use later. For the electricity, we're going to be using our assets from our Electric VFX pack, which you can currently get for 25% off from May 4th to May 20th. So give us your money. But if you want to give us less of your money, we also made a smaller pack with just the assets we used in this episode, so you can get that stupid cheap right now too. So either one, pick your poison, take it or leave it, live, laugh, love. But with these shots that we shot like this, where the assets will be aimed forward, you can make the layer 3D and rotate toward the camera. But we actually made a bunch of assets specifically for angles like this, aimed closer to the camera, and these were actually mainly inspired by these Palpatine shots. So we'll drop one of these assets into the comp and set the blending mode to screen, move the anchor point to the area where the electricity is emitting from, and then move the layer over to one of the hands. Link it to the newly duplicated corresponding tracked null and rotate to the angle that you want. Then move the layer in the timeline to the point we want the electricity to begin and trim the first frames if you want a faster start. We also want the actual motion to be quicker, so we'll speed up the asset, making it twice as fast. We made a ton of these assets larger than 4K to allow room for scaling, but at this distance, we will scale down. Let's pause here to talk about how you can get 2,000 sound effects for free. Like I say on the show all the time, sound is one of the most important aspects of your image. It can ruin or strengthen whatever it is that you're showing. And for this specific moment, I use Sound Cue from our sponsor, Pro Sound Effects. First, if you haven't heard of Pro Sound Effects, you're welcome in advance. They're one of my favorite spots for high quality sound effects, and to make their sounds, they work with top sound artists and Oscar winners like Mark Mangini, who worked on Dune, and Richard King, who worked on Inception. You know, small indie films. Now they have a desktop app called SoundCue, which lets you access their sound library in the cloud and send those sounds directly to your timeline. And this is how you get those sweet 2,000 sound effects and 100 music tracks for free. You just download SoundCue and sign up for the free version, and you get all that plus unlimited local files and access to freesound.org in the app. Normally, you'll search online, find the sound you need, download, bring it in, cut it down, and so on. Or at best, you have sounds that you bring in from full folders folders right into your project. Here, you can search for what you need and send it right to your project. To do that, you can either click and drag to your timeline, or hit this little arrow to send to your timeline, or hit the S key to send. You also have some nice options here for how you want to send each sound as well. So say we have this shot here, no production sound at all, starting from scratch. We can jump into Sound Queue and start searching for what we need to build out our sound here and have something solid very quickly. And this is with a great amount of free sounds. But you can also upgrade to the full subscription to get over 100,000 sound effects and over 20,000 music tracks. This will absolutely make your editing life better, so get started now on the free plan with no credit card required. Then if you do want to upgrade to the subscription, use our code FilmRiot to get 3 months free. So go to prosoundeffects.com/FilmRiot to download now. Now that our asset is sped up, it ends too quickly for this specific shot, so we'll duplicate the asset a few times and stagger them throughout the timeline, overlapping slightly so they continue without any gaps. You can keep the same asset, but we'll swap these duplicates out with a new one by selecting them and alt-click and drag another asset above and let go to replace. We'll change the anchor point to realign and can also flip the middle layer vertically to alter their repetition. The velocity of the different assets changes, so we'll also keyframe the first one to scale up quickly over time. We then did the same thing for the other hand using different assets, changing some of the settings and linking to the other duplicate null until we had this. Select all the assets and the duplicated nulls, right click and pre-compose as our electricity comp. Now set the layer back to screen, and for effects, we'll first use solid composite set to black, then a tint to remove color. To add a glow, we'll use Red Giant's optical glow, altering the settings to our liking, then add Video Copilot's color vibrance, choosing an electric blue to tie into our footage and the practical lighting color we used. By the end of the shot, his hands are out of focus, so we'll add a camera lens blur and keyframe the amount to start at 0 and increase by the end of the timeline. You can duplicate the glow and adjust some of the settings to pinpoint specific highlight areas and stretch the scale horizontally to look like anamorphic flares. We used this look as a starting point and went back to adjust some of the effect to push it further. Sometimes you want to see a lot of detail in the highlights, other times you want them blown out, so it just depends on the look you're going for. To add some stronger light reaction on his hands, we'll make an adjustment layer placed beneath the electricity comp, move the center over his hands, and scale up the layer to make sure all edges are outside the view. Link to track null and make a mask around the hand with a high feather. Because of the color of our lights, we can't just boost the exposure, otherwise it looks messy. But if you apply a tint effect first to remove the saturation, we can then get a better result changing the exposure settings. Set to screen, then you can adjust the mask, saturation, and exposure to fine-tune before duplicating the layer and scaling down to be a more focused point of light. Once again, tweaking exposure till we're happy. Now duplicate both, move over the other hand, and link to the other null. Make sure to trim all these layers to when the electricity first appears. Then this next step isn't necessary for the Sith look specifically, but it can help tie things in more if you use another adjustment layer with a displacement effect and use the electricity comp above as the displacement map just to have a subtle effect on our footage. The only downside is the displacement can look a bit sharp, especially when his hands are out of focus. With Red Giant's chromatic displacement, you can keyframe it to soften, but to take it further, you can use a vector blur set to constant length, increase the amount, and choose the electricity as the vector map. Alternatively, you can use a camera lens blur, choosing the electricity as the blur map with effects and masks selected. We really liked the camera shake they used in the Star Wars scene to emphasize the intensity of the power, so we'll drop our comp into a new comp and split the layers at the moment the electricity starts. We'll also remove the previous few frames, similar to what we do with punches, to sell the sudden impact better. On the second layer, alt-click the position and type in a wiggle expression. We like the look of 25 by 25 and enable motion blur. For the first few frames, for more impact, we're going to splice again and increase the wiggle value. Select all the layers and scale up the footage until it fills the frame. In the original, they have a lot of lens flares and the overall image gets almost blown out. We also include practical flashing lens flares stock, which we can just drop into the comp and set to screen, either leaving as is or layering up and splicing different moments we think work until we get this. And to get some more defined lens dirt bokeh, we found a quick and easy customizable way is to create a solid layer and apply a fractal noise effect. effect, lowering brightness and increasing contrast, then using a lens blur with boosted radius, roundness, and diffraction fringe. Next, an exposure effect with the amount increased pretty high, and a CC radial blur set to straight zoom with the amount increased a bit just to soften the harsh edges. Create a new adjustment layer and select the solid to use as a Luma matte. Add a curves effect to darken the overall footage, keeping mainly the highlights. Add a transform effect with the scale increased and a fast box blur increasing the blur radius. Now set the blending mode to screen, and if you don't want them everywhere, you can use a feathered mask for areas you want to keep, and have these layers start at the same time as the electricity. You can easily change the pattern and scale with the fractal noise evolution and the lens blur value to really customize it. Lastly, we'll finish the shot with a soft overall glow, chromatic aberration, and color grade, giving us this. Like we mentioned earlier, if you wanted to use different assets such as side-on angles, you can make them 3D layers and rotate them toward the camera instead. It really just depends on the angle of your shot and how far you want to rotate before it starts to look too flat. But once the glow effects are back on, it can usually work pretty well. With this, we used our electricity pack with the assets Beam 6, 10, and 11 assets, and this is using Disperse 31 and 32 assets, which give a different style. But that's it for today. Make sure to check out our electric pack in the notes below. We also have some links for other electric tutorials we've done in the past, and of course links to check out Pro Sound Effects and SoundQ, and make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified when we put out more content. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.
Work it, watch me work it. I'ma do it how I wanna when I twerk it.